our being. The very laws of God were written on every fiber of our being. So as soon as they can, there we go. So you're very familiar with the passage in Psalms 139 where we're told that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. You know, I don't think it will be until eons of eternity roll by that we can really understand the mighty power of God. You know, even now we think of, he spoke and it came to pass. You know, but yet when he created Adam and with his own hands formed that mud, and when you think of forming something, a sculpture made out of clay, made out of mud, do you think of the intricacies that would be put in there? Do you think of the molecules that make up our being, the fibers, the atoms? That was all put there in the mud. And then God, with his very breath, breathed into this inanimate form, and man became a living soul. And everything that God made, what did he say about it? It was good. And at the end of the week, after making man and creating woman out of man, what did he pronounce it? Very good. And so I ask the question, are laws good? Yes, they are very good. I'm very thankful for every law that God has put in throughout the universe. But what happens when they're broken? What happened the summer of 2020? The beginning of the chaos, and riots were breaking out in cities, and the police were just withdrawing, and there were looting and beatings and chaos and murders. That was no law. Did that happen in the French Revolution? Did that happen in heaven when God's law, his order of authority, was broken? There was chaos. We were told there was war. And then in perfect creation, when everything was good and beautiful, we can't even imagine that. Sister White said that there was an island in Hawaii. I don't remember whether it's Kauai. That was the most similar to heaven that she had seen. You know, but here on this earth, because of sin, we see chaos. We see chaos in our homes. We see chaos in nature. We see chaos in our government. We see chaos in our hearts, don't we? So God's purpose is to bring back peace and harmony. And to do that, what is he going to restore? His laws. He wants to restore his laws. So God has a purpose. We're not talking here. There we go. Throughout the last 6,000 years, the plan to redeem man has been happening. 2,000 years ago, the sacrifice that paid the price for sin happened at the cross. And yet there's another work that God is doing. And we know Christ came the first time to give his life as the sacrifice lamb. And we know he's coming again. And in Amos 4:12, there was a purpose in that message that God gave to Amos. Prepare to meet thy God, O Israel. But does that apply to us today? What does prepare mean? What is the message that Amos was given at that time? that applies today. If you look at the Hebrew word, it means to be fitted, to be fixed or sealed, to meet, to be ready to meet, to be perfect, to make preparation, to be stable. So Amos is saying, you are about to meet your God, O Israel. Who is this God that we're about to meet? Who is our God? Is this any God? Are there many gods? There are many gods in this world. There is a fallen angel that claims to be God and wants to sit on the throne of God. And he puts himself in the place of God, and we're told in Revelation that he is going to deceive the whole world, that he is God. And the whole world, it appears, is going to follow him, except for those who have studied the Scriptures, the Word of God. They will not be deceived, because in the Word, it tells us who the true God is. And after Amos 4:12 in verse 13, it tells us what God that is. He that formeth the mountains, he that createth the wind and declareth unto man what is his thought. What does that mean? He declares to man his thought. He tells us before it happens what is going to happen. Is there any other intelligence or being that can do that? That can accurately tell us the past, the present, and the future? In Isaiah, within those chapters in the 40s, about chapter 45 to 48, God is declaring, here's how you know who I am. I can tell you what's going to happen before it happens. And so Amos is telling us that the God that we are going to meet is the only being that can tell us his thought ahead of time. He makes the morning darkness. He treads upon the high places of the earth. The Lord, the God of hosts, is his name. The God of all of creation, that is our God. So who are we to prepare to meet? We are to prepare to meet our Creator. The very one that formed, that created the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. He is the one that created me. He is the one that created you. And he is going to hold us accountable for how we have treated this body that he has given us, how we have done the work that he has called us to do to declare his name among the world. He is coming again to bring his people home that understand his laws, appreciate them, and will follow them though the heavens fall. But Amos says, prepare to meet thy God. What preparation do we do in order to be ready to meet God in peace? Will there be people that don't meet God? Is there anyone who will not face God? The second coming or the third coming? No, there is not a single person. Every created human will meet him. The angels will be there. But will they all be happy? No. Will the majority be happy? No. So what is this preparation? God always gives a message. It was mentioned today in Sabbath school, in the preliminaries, and then in our Sabbath school class. God always gives present truth. Present truth is the message that we need to learn and know and give for the crisis that is at hand. Are we as a world, as a people, in crisis? We are in the greatest crisis since the time of the fall, since Lucifer rebelled and was cast out of heaven. This is the climatic end to the chaos brought on by the broken law of God. It is called present truth. Did God give a message to Noah to prepare for the flood? Absolutely. Did he give a message to the world to prepare for Jesus' first coming? In any of the times in the Old Testament when the children of Israel were in crisis and a calamity was going to fall on them because they broke the law and had turned to other gods, did he give a message? He gave a message. So probably everyone, most everyone in my hearing, know what the present truth is. What is the message that God has given for the last generation? Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. We're told in a letter, 79, that Christ is coming the second time. How? Is he coming like the first time? No. He is coming with power unto salvation to prepare human beings for this event, the second coming. He has sent the first, the second, and the third angel's message. So we're not going to go through them. You're all very familiar with them and can probably quote them from memory. So I just put them up on the screen. You can turn to them in your Bible. It is our message for the hour. Everything else comes under this umbrella. And so we know, as Diane has said, we're to fear God and give glory to him. Who? The one that made the heavens and the earth. The second message is Babylon is fallen. The third message is that anyone who worships the beast in his image, they will receive the wrath of God. And the final part of that third angel's message is, here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. There will be a people who uphold the law of God that has been broken from the day that Lucifer rebelled in heaven. So just quickly, the first angel's message is a message of worship. Who are you going to worship? Is it the true God? Is it the one who is the creator? Anyone in authority makes laws, right? Now, we don't have any children in here, but I just kind of laugh even thinking of this question. Do children in the house make laws? Sometimes do they? Do they rule? But they shouldn't, right? It's the parents, because they have the authority. They are the ones that are to set the standard. So the ones that we worship has the authority to make laws. And those laws identify their character. So the laws that we find in Exodus 20, they were written with the very finger of God. Isn't that incredible? Why were they written on a stone? To preserve them. Were they preserved, even though they were written on a stone? Where does God want to write his laws? In our hearts, in our minds. So that's what we're told in Ezekiel 36 and in Hebrews 8 and 10 and chapter 10 and 16. God says, I will write my laws in your heart and in your mind. Isn't that wonderful? We don't want our hearts to be hearts of stone. We want him to be able to write with his finger on a subdued heart. And so in that law, we see that there's something that identifies God as creator. That's why we're here today, isn't it? Because he gave us the Sabbath in the fourth commandment. It tells his title. He is Lord. He is creator. That's his title. And his territory is the heavens, the earth, the sea, everything he made. He is ruler over everything he made. And so that's the God we are to worship. But we also are to glorify him. And what does it mean to glorify God? In 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. Every thought that we have, every motive that we have is to be a reflection to God that he created something that was good. And that all of the worlds will see that God's ways are just and true. We're told in Signs of the Time from 1892, to give glory to God is to reveal his character in our own. Our own character is to reveal our Creator, the mighty power of God, and thus make him known. What is our purpose? We have two purposes in life: to get to know God and serve him and tell others about him. That's it. Whether you live to be 99 or only 9. Our purpose is to learn of our loving God that gave his life for us and surrender to him. And in whatever way we make known the Father or the Son, we glorify God. In all that your right hand findeth to do, do it unto the glory of God. So the second and third angel's message. The second message, Babylon has fallen. That's in contrast to the true God. There's a movement, there's a group, there's a power out there that has the wine of Babylon and a false message. They're teaching truly a false God, false standards. They've changed the laws of God. And we know particularly, ultimately, the final test will be over the Sabbath. But the Sabbath is not just being in church on the right day. It is resting totally in the laws, in the character of our God, and trusting him and following him all the way. That's rest of the Sabbath. So the third angel's message is just kind of bringing back the first and second. There are going to be two groups of people, and those that will not surrender and sacrifice their ways and give in to the pressure that is on the earth to obey the laws of the world, the laws of this false system. There will be a group that follow these false laws, and then there will be those that will be true to God, to his laws, the moral laws, the laws of nature, the laws of health, to the very end. So in order to get this message out, this is all review, isn't it? I'm not telling you anything new. But God rose up a people that at the perfect time, the prophetic time, the end of the 2300 days that are mentioned in Daniel 8, they came to its close in 1844, and that brings us to Revelation 14, where the hour of his judgment began. And so from 457 BC to 1844, there was this time period. And at the end of that time period, God rose up a people to prepare the world to meet their God. And so we have the work as John the Baptist. From 1844, this small group of people that hung on to the beliefs and the message, the history that they had seen, and said, something happened. What happened? And they saw that the work in the sanctuary, that Christ went from the holy place to the most holy place. and that the final work of judgment was going on. So in 1863, this small group of people continued to press together and carry the light to the world. And they organized May 21st, 1863, and officially the Seventh-day Adventist organization became a conference. Why? Because as a body, as a group, they could put their talents, they could put their resources of money and talents and energy to give this message to the world. 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks after this organization, a small group of believers met together in Otsego, Michigan, with Sister White and her husband, James, and a number of others. And the burden of their prayer was, how can we best give this important message to the world? Can you imagine that weight? It's a weight that is passed on to us today. It's the same responsibility that we have. And they were also going to pray for James. James had a lot of health illnesses, problems, strokes, and so they were praying for his recovery. Sister White was brought into vision. It was one of her first large visions. It was the first health message. It was 20 minutes of a 2-hour vision. It took her 1 full year to write out what God showed her in that 20 minutes. And that was the unfolding of the beginning of a health message. And God was saying, I could heal James as I have in the past in answer to prayer, but there's going to be a lot of spurious miracles in the world because Satan is going to work miracles. I'm going to teach you how to keep your health by following the laws of health. I want you to educate the people. Teach them about alcohol and tobacco and coffee, and then the work was progressive, and over her lifetime she gave messages that were to show the perfect diet, the perfect lifestyle for this vehicle that God has given us. There's a reason that God gave that message at that time. We're told in volume 1 of the testimonies, the health reform I was shown is part of the third angel's message and is just as closely connected with it as the arm and the hand with the human body. So is there a connection with the health and the third angel's message? We're told there is. Does that make sense to you? Kind of makes sense. But what does health have to do with the wine of the wrath of God is going to fall on Babylon? Do you see a connection? We're told there's a connection, but we're told that the message, the health, is connected just as the hand is to the body. If you remember back in Exodus 15, the children of Israel had crossed the Red Sea, and 3 days out, they ran out of water. Remember? And they came to the pool of Marah, and it was bitter. And they cried unto the Lord. And the Lord told Moses, cast this tree into the waters, and they were made sweet, right? Do you know what that tree was? Do you know what the pool of Marah is? The pool of Marah is the pool of our bitterness, of what we drink every day because of the sorrow of sin. But it is the tree that Christ was crucified on that is cast into these bitter waters that makes our life sweet. And then God said to them in verse 26, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all of his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. So this is our God. He is saying, if you follow my laws, I will give you health. They will keep you in health. It's not arbitrary. It's working with the way he made us. And then in Exodus 16, we see that manna and the Sabbath test were joined together, right? We're gonna move on from there because the clock ticks. So we're also told in volume 3 that to make plain natural law, those laws of health, the laws of nature, the laws of our being, and to urge obedience to it is the work that accompanies the third angel's message to do what? To prepare a people for the coming of the Lord. Now this is from volume 2. In order to render to God perfect service, you must have clear conceptions of his requirements. Would it be fair for a parent to discipline a child if they had not a clue what the rules were? No. So God has given us volumes of writings to make it very clear what his standards are, what is the best way to follow him. You should use the most simple food, prepared in the most simple manner, that the fine nerves of the brain be not weakened. So she's saying that what you eat affects the nerves of the brain. What you put in your mouth, in your stomach, is going to affect how you think. That they are not weakened, benumbed, or paralyzed, making it impossible for you to discern sacred things and to value the atonement, the cleansing blood of Christ, as of priceless worth. God is giving us a standard, a way to live our life so that our brains will be clear, so that we will understand the price that was paid for our redemption. We say John 3:16. It's the most common memory verse, but it's one of the most powerful verses in the Bible. That God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. In order to be prepared for translation, the people of God must know themselves. They must understand in regard to their own physical frames, that they may be able with the psalmist to exclaim, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. So what that is talking about in this passage, both that is written by Sister White and quoting Psalms 139, is that understanding how the body works. We call that physiology. So you all know what the stomach is, right? So you know anatomy enough to know you have your mouth here with teeth and tongues, and it goes down the esophagus, and the esophagus has a sphincter that keeps everything that goes down into the stomach from coming back up. It should work that way. Sometimes it doesn't. You know that, right? But if you know the stomach, do you know how it works? Do you understand that if you ate an apple this morning at breakfast, do you understand how this body takes that apple and breaks it down into molecules and the different fibers and takes the nutrients, the vitamin C and the fiber and the proteins, mostly sugars in them, and turns them into good blood? Do you understand that? Isn't that amazing? Do you have to think about it? Does it help to know how the stomach works? Does it help to know that one of the things that we're told for good digestion is not to eat between meals? Do you know why that's important? Because when you eat something and you put it into your stomach, let's say you ate breakfast at 7 o'clock, and then you get to church a little bit before 9:30, and you're kind of hungry because maybe you just had a muffin for breakfast, and it's like, well, I better eat something real quick so I can make it through church until potluck. And so you pop a handful of nuts and raisins in your mouth, and is that a good thing? No, the digestion from the food that was in there already stops, and the stomach has to go to work on what you just put in there, and the food from 7 o'clock stays there. And they have actually done studies where they put a camera in the stomach at the end of a day where people have nibbled through the day, like maybe 6 meals a day that doctors recommend, and the food from breakfast is still there. Still there. And worse than that, what happens if you had some food and you leave it out on your counter all day, and by the evening, what's happened to it? It spoils. You know what that's called? Fermented. It actually forms alcohol. And so alcohols are produced in our stomach, and they have also done testing that someone eating constantly, nibbling through the day, their alcohol level at the end of the day could be high enough that they could be arrested for drunk driving. So God gives us principles not to be mean to us, but so that we can function and have bright, good, clear minds. So I'm going to breeze through this because it's going to be time to quit. And I always have too much more to say. But in Psalms 139, I'm just going to tell you this in brief. I have a sermon, it's on, or a talk on the internet. I think it's on YouTube. And it's called Amalgamation. And it goes into this passage. What is being described here is actually the DNA. And when it says in verse 13 that thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb, what that is talking about is when conception happens. You have 23 chromosomes from the father's side, and you have 23 chromosomes from the father's side, and those join together and make an embryo. And that's actually the word that is in verse 15. It's embryo. And so what it is saying, David, I don't know how much God revealed to him, but science in 1953 just discovered, Watson and Crick, the DNA strands that were woven together, and those are the words they use. The two strands that are woven, twisted together, and with 4 different bases, letters A, C, T, and G, God encodes everything that makes your body. And so when it says that you saw me before I even existed, my substance was not hid from thee. When I was made in secret, a hiding place, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the womb of the earth, this body, thine eyes did see my substance. The DNA showed what color your eyes would be. It showed how far apart they would be. It showed what your nose would be shaped like. It showed every part of your body. And God could look at that, and he knew all about you before you were even formed into this body. And just to think of that period of time, Jesus left heaven to become a baby here, right? Did he go through that 9.5-month period where he was just an embryo of 46 chromosomes? Do you ever think about how he humbled himself? And for that period of time, you've seen pictures of babies, embryos and fetuses. That was Jesus, the King of Kings, the Creator. He went to that level. He went through this whole process. He went through the formation of the DNA. So what I want to convey, I could give you a health message in science for a whole week at least, and go into the details of how our body works and the lifestyle, whether it's the sun, our exercise, but particularly our food. Of everything that has an impact on our being, it's what we ingest. But our DNA, that codes for everything, all of the neurotransmitters that are responsible for how you think and making your brain work, those are all coded in the DNA. And that DNA is fragile. It's easily broken. And so errors happen throughout. But you know, God in his mercy, he prepared for sin. And in the DNA, he put, you know how on the computer you can hit backspace? You know, the X? That's what the DNA does. It's like, oops, something picks up. Oh, there's a mistake here. That's not what's supposed to be coded. And it'll cut it out and then put the right thing in. Happens all through the day. But sometimes the DNA doesn't catch it, and there's a mistake. And ultimately, one of the worst things could be cancer. That's a DNA gone awry. It's a good cell that has broken DNA. I'm trying to think how to do this really fast. In Australia, there's a doctor. His specialty is diabetes. And he has discovered that just one time of eating something that has concentrated sugar in it, not like an apple, but let's say a chocolate chip cookie. Just one time, oh yes, I'm sorry, the blood sugar will rise above normal. One time of the blood sugar rising above normal damages the DNA for 2 weeks. The body can repair if there's not chronic damage. But what if you're really good through the week, and then you wait to church because that's the special time, and we have that dessert table over there, and that's your time to, I always marvel at this word, that's your time to cheat and have a treat. If you did that every Sabbath, that's 7 days. What they discovered happens is that the DNA is chronically damaged, and you pass those genes on to your prodigy. So it's a science that has just developed in the last, about 30 years. It's called epigenetics. So the DNA is genetics, but epigenetics is your lifestyle. So you have all these things that code in the DNA and tell the cell what to produce, how to produce your fingernail, how to produce your saliva. Everything that happens in your body, the DNA is telling it what to do. But what tells the DNA what to do? It's your lifestyle. And so what happens when, this is an amazing thing, T. Colin Campbell, if you've watched Forks Over Knives, this is T. Colin Campbell. He really looked into this, and Caldwell Esselstyn. They found that in the DNA, you've heard of oncogenes. So there's genes, there's coding that turns on cancer. Are those good things? No. There are suppressor genes, tumor suppressor genes, and there are things that keep the cancer from forming. One of the things that will turn on oncogenes, tumor production, 100% of the time is a diet, 20% dairy. The protein in dairy, 100% of the times turn on oncogenes. They remove the dairy protein, particularly casein, and the oncogenes stop. Isn't that amazing? That's genetics. So have you heard genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger? In this science, there's a movie out by, a documentary by Nova, and it's called Ghosting Your Genes. And this is an atheistic production. And they actually say that what the ancestors have done from the 3rd and 4th generation are passed on 3 to 4 generations. It's because of the lifestyle of your grandma and grandpa and great-grandma and great-grandpa. So really, lifestyle loads the gun of your ancestors, and they pass it on to you. But you can change it by your lifestyle. So it's time to quit, but I really have something to tell you as I close. Can I go a little bit longer? I don't smell lunch yet. So the everlasting gospel that is mentioned in Revelation 14, what is it? It's God's desire to restore the divine image in us, to perfectly restore us back to how he made us in the garden, our body, our mind, and our spirit. God does not like to see us sick. We're told that the doing of medical missionary work brings rays of heavenly brightness to wearied, perplexed, suffering souls. It is as a fountain open for the wayward, thirsty traveler. Remember that the restoration of the body prepares the way for the restoration of the soul. Have any of you ever done medical missionary work, natural remedies, hot and cold, and, the many different things, charcoal and herbs, and see miracles before your eyes? I thought of this verse in Hebrews 11:32. Paul's going through all this history of all the people that have borne witness of Christ. And then in verse 32 he says, what more should I say? He says, the time will fail me. And that's where I'm at today. When I was first learning natural remedies, I took care of a woman that had hepatitis A. And she was greener than my skirt. It was more like a fluorescent green, from the top of her head to her toes. She was so green. And I went out to her house, and I had her laying down, and I put her feet in hot water, and I did 3 minutes of hot and 30 seconds of cold over her liver. On the third treatment, not the third changes, but the third day that I went, I'm sitting on the floor next to her, and I'm just putting these towels, hot and cold, on her, and the green just drained. It just left. And I was next to her. I didn't say this out loud, but maybe I should have. I said, I just saw a miracle. I just saw a miracle. And all I'm doing is putting hot and cold on her. And in my heart, I thought, this isn't my power. This is the power of God working with the laws that he put into our being. I was so excited. And then shortly after that, there was a gentleman in my folks' house. I don't know if any of you have been to Cottonwood. There was Mount Hope, and right now Hippie Emporium's there. But my parents had this big 2-story, it's actually 3-story house, and next door was a health food store started by hippies. And I mean, it was a shack. This was it started in 1972. And Weldon worked in the produce department. And it's little, and it's like an old cabin, and it was shacky. And you'd go in there, and Weldon would come in. He was, from the Vietnam War. He had been abused by his father, and then he went through the war, and this man was PTSD. And he would stalk me, and I would get irritated. I couldn't wait to get out of there. And so I was talking to my mom one day. It's like, you know what? Weldon needs to be loved. And I started bringing him bread, homemade bread, and he started changing. Well, one day, Weldon's riding his motorcycle home on a 12-mile dirt road out to Sycamore Canyon to his teepee, and he was high on some drug. And he ran across a branch and hit him right across the throat. Now, this happened on a Thursday. On Sabbath morning, I went to my mom's house to go to church with her, and here she is at the dining room table, literally slopping dish towels, hot and cold, dripping all over. And I get the story, how he had ran into this branch. Someone took him to the ER, and he's a hippie making $2.50 an hour, and they tell him he needs surgery. He had severed his vocal cords and ruptured his trachea. And he needed surgery, $50,000 at least. he couldn't talk, but he signed the papers, AMA, against medical advice, and left. I'm a hippie, you know, and you don't guarantee that I'll speak again. For $50,000, I'm going home. So he came over to my mother's house, and I see her doing this, and the hydrotherapy was not her forte. So I said, let me do this. So I took him in. I had a little apartment where he could stay, and I did hot and cold on him 3 times a day. Now, Weldon was an atheist. He hated God. You could run your hands over his shoulders, and you know what that bubble paper's like when you pop it? That's what it was like on his shoulders, because the air from his lungs were going all through his tissue. And he couldn't talk because of the damage to his vocal cords. And I told Weldon when I first got him, I said, Weldon, if you want to be healed, you need to obey God. You're going to eat what I tell you. You're not going to smoke pot anymore. You're not going to have any alcohol. You're going to eat when I tell you. And it's like, and I said, before every treatment, I am going to pray. I'm doing these treatments. And one day I just get started doing the treatments, and he grabs my hand, and he says, he knew that his life was in God's hands. By the 3rd day, he could whisper. By the 3rd day, all of the bubbles were gone. I knew that the trachea had closed up. And by the end of the week, he could talk. He went home, and he came back like 3 times a week for a week or 2, and then that was it. At the end of the year, he had his singing voice back. When I graduated from medical school about 12, 13 years later, I ran next door to see Weldon, and I said, Weldon, guess what? I'm finally a real doctor. And he looked at me and he said, Diane, you were a real doctor back then. I saw God's power. And when I went through medical school and when I went through residency, I never forgot the miracles that I saw. I saw the power of God's foolish remedies, like Naaman dipping in the River Jordan. God's ways are incredible because God's way gives glory to God. The pastor mentioned this last week. We're talking about laws. Does keeping the Sabbath get you to heaven? Will it keep you out if you break it? If you broke, is the laws of gravity going to save you? No. But is breaking them going to maybe cause you to die? Yes, it could. The Sabbath was given for man, for our benefit. The laws of health are given for our joy and our happiness. God, it breaks his heart to see his people suffering. But keeping the laws of health alone, you would just be a good New Ager. You know, you'd be a healthy sinner. We're told that no mere restriction of our diet will cure our diseased appetite. Men will never truly be temperate until the grace of Christ is an abiding principle in the heart, until their hearts are transformed by the grace of God. You can fight your appetite all you want, and you're not going to win. You must surrender your heart to the one who fought the battle of appetite for 40 days. We're told in Steps to Christ, we need to have more distinct views of Jesus. The beauty of holiness is to fill the hearts of God's children. We should seek for divine disclosures of heavenly things. Does God want to give us divine disclosures? Yes. Every day you wake up, God is ready to say, I have something special to tell you. I want to show you more of my character. I want to show you more of my love. I want to show you who I am and how I can take care of you. So one of the greatest things, some of you know this story, but I want to share it today. This is one of the greatest divine disclosures that God has ever given me. All I ever wanted growing up was children. And so I had Samantha, and when she was 3 years old, I went through a 3-year divorce. And I'll tell you, it breaks your heart when a 3-year-old is taken. You know, she had to go with her father. Divorce is horrible. Divorce hurts children. Divorce hurts people. But anyway, the divorce lasted 3 years, and Samantha, when she turned 7 years old, the divorce finished when she was 6, and a year later, 2001, October 19, just a little more than a month past 9/11, when the Twin Towers came down, Samantha was diagnosed with leukemia. This picture, she is 11 years old here. And we are standing in front of Ground Zero. I remember the day that I got the diagnosis that my 7-year-old had leukemia. And I knew she could die. And I remember it was a 5-year battle. I remember thinking, I didn't care about the Twin Towers anymore. My Twin Towers just came down. God will do whatever it takes to bring you to Ground Zero, so that you will understand that there is nothing more valuable than to win heaven, than to have that union with your Redeemer forever. And so I'm telling you this story today, not just because it's a sad story. As I said, the church in Cottonwood, when we had her memorial, there was a sign on the foyer door said, treat everyone you meet as though they have a broken heart, because they probably do. In this world, there's broken hearts. We all meet death. So Samantha went through a 5-year battle, and after 5 years, 2 cord blood transplants, the immune suppression from all the chemicals, she got an infection, a fungal infection in her brain. And the fungus was growing and literally pushing her brain out her skull. And she's here in the hospital. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And she was in a semi-conscious state. She couldn't talk because the fungus was putting pressure on her motor nerves, so she couldn't move her left side and she couldn't talk. She could hardly open her eyes. She's all puffy from all the steroids that she had been given, which suppressed the immune system. And one of the last things that she did, she couldn't say anything to me, but she gave me the sign language, you know, I love you. And I took a picture of that because the last thing that Christ did was without words, when he spread out his hands and said, I love you this much. And so she was in this semi-conscious state for a week, and then she started having seizures. And we induced a coma. And during that last week, if you can only imagine, I mean, your brain is in a limited space. And as the fungus was growing, you see how fast a fungus grows? Well, it was growing rapidly and putting pressure, and her pain was escalating by the hour. My mother, this is a picture of Samantha's grandmother beside Samantha's bed. And at the time I took this picture, I didn't know what she was thinking. But later, I learned. As she was holding her little granddaughter's hand, she was 12 years old, Samantha had 2 wishes. She says, Mama, I don't know why, but before I die, I want 2 things. I want to turn 12, and I want to be baptized. In April 2006, Sean Boonstra came to Phoenix and did NET 2006, and Samantha was baptized. And in May, she turned 12. And so here she is, and my mother is looking at her. She's older, she's lived her life, and if she could exchange her life for Samantha, she would. But it was impossible. She could not take Samantha's place. If $1 billion would have bought a cure, she would have found a way for it. But no amount of money. She was a $2 million baby in 5 years. Medicine failed. Did God fail? No. And she looked at her little granddaughter, and she realized she was utterly helpless. She could do nothing to change the situation. And then she realized, and this is the part of the story, that we all must come to realize. It was in our quarterly today, Christ in the crucible. When Christ came to this earth, his life was constant, even from a child, as we learned. Herod wiped out a whole town trying to get rid of Jesus, killed, murdered children under 2. All through his life, evil was happening. Evil was on his tail, to the point that he was in Gethsemane, pleading with the Father, is there any other way? Is there any other way to save our people? 3 times the answer came. There's no other way. There's no other way. And finally Jesus said, thy will be done. But God the Father could have said, like he did to Abraham, it's enough to know you will do this. You don't have to go through it. It's okay, I accept it. He could have done something else, couldn't he? Jesus voluntarily took our place with the idea that he might never come out of the tomb. We know today he did. We know today Samantha dying is victory. Because of Christ, she will raise again. And because of Christ, every one of our loved ones that die can come out of the tomb. And because of Christ, because of his endurance, he has the power to save us from any temptation. He has the power to keep us by the faith of Jesus. We are told that Christ is waiting with longing desire for the manifestation of himself in his church. And when the character of Christ shall be perfectly reproduced in his people, then he will come to claim them as his own. It is my prayer today that as we study, what were we told? What was the prayer that Jesus said, the admonition of Jesus to the disciples? 3 times, watch and pray. Watch and pray. That means study. Study the principles. Study so you're not deceived. Study so that you know how to have a clear mind, so that you will not be deceived by the enemy. That's why God gave us this health message. That's why he longs for us to sacrifice our appetite. He wants us to be a spectacle to the universe. The weakest, most degenerated generation is going to stand and vindicate the character of God the Father, Jesus Christ, through the Holy Spirit, Do you want to be one of those people prepared to stand? Though they threaten you with death, will you stand?